those four quadrants of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And then the center of that is social and our relationships with people. If we take care of those four things of ourself every day, we will have healthy relationships with people.
Welcome to the Divine Hangout. I'm your host, Hillary Jubilee. It is my intention that when you listen to this podcast, you experience an increase in peace, abundance, and divine miracles in your life experience. If you love all things spirituality, wellness, healing, manifestation, and miracles, you are in the exact right place at the exact right time. Let's enter the portal together. Welcome to the Divine Hangout. It's Hillary, and I am joined today by my lovely grandmother, and her name is Janet Sinclair. Thank you for joining us, Gran. I'm so excited to dive into spirituality and some of your history, and yeah, let's just dive right into it.
Okay.
I'm gonna ask you to maybe explain your upbringing and your spiritual beliefs and how that evolved over time. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think my earliest memory is when I was 3 and I was woken in the middle of the night and my dad lifted me out of bed, wrapped a blanket around me, and passed me out my brother's bedroom window onto the roof. And I was scared because I thought, well, maybe there's a fire. I don't know what I thought. It was only 3. But when we got outside, it was very, very cold. And he said, look up. And there was the Aurora Borealis. And I was just in awe and trying to figure out what it was as my dad was explaining to me what it was. But I was only 3. I didn't really understand. But that was the first moment of there's something beyond. And then when I was 5, I was playing the piano, and the radio was playing the music on the piano, and I pretended I was playing it. And then I looked out the window and looked into the sky, and suddenly I was in the sky. I was the music. So that was kind of...
As a child?
Yes, I was about 4 or 5. And then the last one in that time period was, that I remember, was I was coming home from Sunday school when I was 4. And we were making our own little books of the 23rd Psalm. And I was walking along. It was a green construction book, bright blue sky. I was wearing a yellow dress with red flowers on it. And I opened the book and I could read the page. It said, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. And I realized I'm reading, but I also understood what that meant. That goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. And I don't think I really learned very much from the Sunday school, because if you memorized the line, you got a chocolate bar. So that's all I cared about was the chocolate bar. But that little moment of clarity of goodness and mercy shall follow me all my life, that's what's kind of sustained me. So throughout all the whatever all happened after that. So that's what kind of gave me that kind of connection to inner and beyond.
So those are all events as a child?
Yes, yeah.
So what about as you got older?
As I got older, my dad had mental health issues, and my mother also had trauma, and the Gabor Mate kind of thing about small t trauma and big T trauma. I did have some big T trauma around age 7 or 8 with sexual abuse with a friend of the family that went on for 5 years. But the gift that came out of that was I could hold secrets, and that it wasn't me, and I was beyond. I learned how to disassociate, but somehow I just knew it was it was it set me apart from other people, and so I always felt not quite relating to anybody, not trusting, and all of those things. But there was a gift that came out of that, and that was going inner. So, and also at the age of 8, I had this huge quest to understand every religion, and so I would pepper my friends with, what church do you go to? Can I come? so I had a friend, Judy Green, who was Jewish. I got to go to the Jewish synagogue. So angry that the women had to sit in the back, but not understanding anything, but just loved the feeling of being there.
Around what year would that be?
That would have been in the 50s.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I went to, I had an East Indian friend, and I said, can I come to church? And she ended up, it was a Pentecostal Christian church. So that was an assumption on my part. But I loved the singing, and I had a friend that was Roman Catholic. I went to her church quite a bit. And my grandmother got us to go to the Anglican, I forget what it was called, but some church in Victoria. So my parents didn't go to church and didn't believe in anything. When I was 13, I asked my mother, do we believe in God? And she said, we believe in God, we just don't believe in worshiping him. And so that made me really have to
What did she mean by that?
She just didn't want to go to church. But she was okay with believing in God. So my parents never went to church. I went to church with my grandmother sometimes, but all four, like my two brothers and sister, as all adults, we all went to church. So I believe that it was because my grandmother just prayed for us all the time, and we all ended up in different churches. So, but that quest for understanding God, and that there's more to life than what you see in front of you. Yeah.
So when you were talking about the big T trauma, is that like when you said separated, like you separated, did you mean like you separated your personality and like who you are as a human from like your spirit? Like
yes.
you meant you like the gift from that was that you realized that you are not just a body.
Yes, and it came back together when I had in 1988 when I had labyrinthitis, and that is an infection in both inner ears, and if I opened my eyes, the room would spin, so I had to lie flat in a dark room with my eyes closed for 10 days.
So this is at this point you now have 5 children?
Yeah. Yes. I jumped ahead quite a bit.
So you're in your 20s?
Yeah. Yes, and I was 34 or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So 36.
Okay.
Yeah, 36, and I had 5 children, and so I lay there for 10 days in the dark, because if I opened my eyes, I would just get dizzy and then throw up, and but that's when I realized my mind, I am much more than my body, my personality. I'm way beyond that. I could actually live the rest of my life like that. I don't know if you ever saw The English Patient, that movie.
No.
But that's, from war, he lost his face, and he lost the use of his arms and legs and everything, but he was still alive, and he was still in there somewhere. He couldn't communicate, and a woman nurse would look after him, and then he came to the realization that he was way more than just his body. So that was my kind of experience of bringing it back together.
Wow. Okay. So going to all of these different churches.
Yes.
What did you study religion in any other way, or
I read everything I could. I think because I also, around age 8, I also had scarlet fever, nephritis, and rheumatic fever. So for the whole of grade 3, I was in the hospital or at home. And so I read every single book my parents had.
In grade 3?
Yes. And I just read and read. I didn't understand most of it, but that quest.
Seeking.
Yes, always seeking. And my mom had some inspirational books and things like that. And my grandmother gave me In Tune with the Infinite by Ralph Waldo Trine. And I just read the first chapter over and over and over and over.
In Tune with the Infinite.
Yes.
Okay, I'll have to look that one up.
Yeah. And after my grandmother passed, I got her books, and so I'm going to give it to you.
Oh, thank you.
Whenever you're ready for it. Yeah.
Thanks.
So you don't have to go buy
Okay.
it.
Thank you. Okay, I was going to say something to that.
Oh, yeah, but the concept that I got at a very young age was that God is always looking after us. Always. And all the hardships and things I went through as a single mom or whatever, I always felt that all I had to do was lift my foot, and crossing a river that's challenging, all I have to do is lift my foot and the next stone is there, and then I put it down, and then as long as I lift my foot and take a step, there, I don't see a stone, but there it is under the water. So that's what that book really gave me, the feeling that
you're supported.
Yes. Yeah.
What a beautiful thing to realize. You read that book when you were in grade 3?
No,
Oh.
I probably read it more in grade 5 or 6,
Okay.
but
So.
yeah, over and over that first chapter.
Yeah.
Over.
It reminds me of, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but there's a video, I think it might be like a Mr. Bean thing, but he is like walking across, and it's like traffic and there's buses, and he just keeps walking straight, and like all these buses and things start organizing themselves, and he's just walking like, I think he's kind of absent-minded, but like everything's coming, just like saving him.
Yes.
Like everywhere he's walking, there's something there.
I have seen that, Mr. Bean. Yes. Yeah, that's how, and my life was always, crazy and chaotic and everything, but I just knew, I just keep moving forward.
Mm.
Yeah.
So how did that lead to you becoming, pastor the right word? Or
well, in 1969, I had a friend on the school bus said, just by what we were talking about, they were all into automatic writing and Ouija boards and things. And
so how old are you now?
I was 16, 17. And she said, 16, yeah. And she said, well, you should come to this lecture on Wednesdays. So I went. And it was about biopsychology and biopsycho-spiritual psychology. So it was mind, body, spirit, and emotion, or something like this, the holistic person. And it just really resonated with me that, okay, this is what I've been looking for, is the mind and body are one. You can't separate it. And so I went to the Wednesday lectures for about almost a year. And then they said, oh, if you like that, why don't you come on Sunday to a church? And I went, it's a church? And I was really against churches at the time. By then, as a teenager, I had kind of gone through a cynical, God is dead kind of period. And then, so I came to the church, and then it was, at the time, I think it was called The Life More Abundant. And because Jesus taught about life is abundant, the abundance of life. And so that's how I kind of just ended up in that church and joining the choir and taking classes and theology classes. And then over 20 years, I took theology, divinity, and metaphysics. And so it took me 20 years, but I got ordained as a minister. So, and when I started, it was actually certified as a master's program. But by the time I ended, they lost their accreditation, so there was only a certificate. It was way more work than my master's program.
Wow. Way
more, because we had to work on ourselves.
And what would you have a master's in again?
I have a master's in counseling psychology.
Right. Okay. So what's the name of the church? Live More Abundant?
It was, at one point it was called a Canadian Temple of Life, a Canadian Temple of Abundant Life. And then they had a big controversy with a leader and everything, and he left, and then it split into 3 groups, and then the one that I joined, they called it the Christian Apostolic Church.
Okay. So was it Christian then?
Yes.
Okay.
Christian.
It
And
was.
the liturgy book we used was the Ancient Catholic. So it was the Old Catholic liturgy, the covenants and principles based on Old Catholic before the Catholics split and went to Rome. So that became Roman Catholic, and then it also split to Orthodox Greek Catholic. So Catholics divide themselves to Roman Catholics and then the Greek Orthodox, which was more in Russia and everything. And our philosophy comes from that Byzantine before that happened.
Mm.
So those original writings of the Bible.
So what are in a nutshell, like what were the Christian beliefs that the church held?
The one thing that our church did was that everybody develops their own philosophy. So there was no creed we had to follow. It was just more about, I developed this philosophy that Jesus, there was no immaculate birth. We're all immaculate births. Jesus was a person, and he learned he traveled, that hidden 30 years of his life, he traveled around the world and learned from Tibetan monks and ancient Sanskrit and the Upanishads, and he was learning all of that, and then came back to his people and then tried to teach that life is much more than just these rules. And
that's exactly what makes the most sense, right? Because I've been listening to there's this podcast called Next Level Soul, and he talks about that, like how Catholics, I don't actually know exactly what they believe, but from what I gather, they believe like he's just there and he's enlightened and he arrived on earth enlightened. And so what this podcaster was saying was that it makes more sense that he traveled around and studied with all these masters and gained the knowledge over time, and because he's a human born on earth. So
yes.
Yeah.
And in our theology studying, we had to really study in depth the first 5 books of the Quran, the Christian Bible, the Upanishads, and 2 others I can't remember right now. One was Taoism or something. But we had to study them and compare them and find the common golden thread that went through it all. And I wrote this 25,000 word essay on this assignment. Took me a year.
Whoa.
And basically they all say God is light and love and be kind. so all that stuff and men in those days would just say, well, this is the rule of this and that, and lose completely the message that God is love and light and just be kind.
Yeah.
So but I had to write this big long academic paper about it, but that's basically my conclusion.
Was it the Bhagavad Gita?
Yes.
It was?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I haven't read it yet. I've kind of
Upanishads are in that, yeah.
That was one of the ones?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the Quran is just a lovely, yeah. And there's some other book, the Diaglot, which is the Greek version.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So with the metaphysics and all these things that you're studying, you mentioned to me at one point that you were studying the work of Neville Goddard as well?
Yes, that was part of our theology. We had to read essays on Neville Goddard, and the one that stands out for me was about you have to feel it.
Feeling is the secret.
Yes, and it took me a long time to really understand it. I understood it in my head.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay, I get that. You have to feel it. Yeah, I have no idea how to do that. It's like because of my upbringing, and I grew up in a house where you don't feel, and you don't talk and you don't express your feelings. And so everything was just repressed and shut down, and especially you don't ever show anger until it explodes out. So so I was never taught any kind of, but that's how I was brought up. But I knew in a very young age that you should be doing that. Yeah.
So how did you learn to emotionally regulate? Did you teach yourself
I'm still
that way?
learning.
Okay. That's fair. Me too.
I would never say, oh, I know how to do that. No, I'm learning all the time.
Okay. Okay. Where else?
I know I kind of went all over the place, but it's what I'm learning right now is that there's no such thing as time.
Yeah.
That it's all about space, and time space is the same thing. So,
what do you mean it's all about space?
It's where you are. So that's one thing I learned from Indigenous, is to acknowledge the Indigenous land that you're on, and give gratitude, and that helps to ground you. And the Saanich people that used to live here, that took care of the land for thousands and thousands of years. And so I just have a feeling of appreciation for the people that have lived here, and then the land, and it connects me to the land. And so that's what I mean about space and place. That is just acknowledging this space that we're in right now.
The here and now.
Yeah. But it doesn't mean that my great-grandmother is not here with us right now. You know, she probably could have walked on this road when she was 36. Yeah.
So how did you get interested in Indigenous culture? What brought you to that?
Well, when I was doing my bachelor's degree at Simon Fraser University, and one of my many part-time jobs as a single mom going to school and always having some kind of part-time job, I worked in the First Nations office at SFU, and it was just the woman director and me as her assistant. And then I started researching, and I also took courses in psychology. One of the child development courses I took was residential school and the impact that would have on a child, and I researched that. And so that's when I just really started connecting, especially with that woman who was First Nations. And then I just, on my whole career, was always working with Indigenous people. At UBC, I worked with Tim Michelle, who was the Indigenous coordinator, and we created a kind of a peer program for students to support each other. And then when I came to VIU, I got to co-teach with elders, and I got to travel to Ontario and work with Anishinaabe, and down to Chile and work with the Mapuche woman, and the wisdom. So I learned about intergenerational trauma, which, Gabor Mate talks about, but I also learned about intergenerational wisdom. So, and if you ever have a chance to read Lee Miracle's books, Celia's Song, that talks about both of those things, though, in a real life way. It's a tough book to read, but yeah, it's incredible.
So, two things I want to say, or two directions I want to go with that. Can you describe your experience in Chile? Because I know you had an experience with a woman who did.
Yes, we drove up the mountain. I was in Chile for an International Indigenous Knowledge Conference, and I was invited to present because I was doing the Canoe of Life model of portfolio, which is basically helping Indigenous students know who they are and where they come from, and getting a sense of pride from the land they come from and the people they come from. It helps them with being in university, and it helps them to know where they're going. And so I went to Chile to present, and then I met this lovely woman, Pamela, I don't know her Mapuche name, but she invited me up to her yurt up in up the mountain, and we spent one night, day and night there, and she did a healing with me and the fire, and yeah, just herbs and healing, and she connected me with my grandmother, who was there. She was.
So what was your experience of having your grandmother there?
Well, she tapped my shoulder, and that's what she used to do when I was playing the piano. She would tap my shoulder to keep me in, because I had a real learning the piano. I had a real hard time with timing. It was because I was so tight and anxious, and I couldn't just let energy flow. I was like trying to get it perfect, and she would tap my shoulder like that. So she was sitting there. I could smell lavender, and she was tapping my shoulder, and the Mapuche woman would translate into Spanish to her daughter, and then the daughter would translate into English to me.
And in what was she saying? Like,
she was saying about that my grandmother worked hard at trying to heal, because she got divorced in the 30s, which was a very unusual thing. And marrying the wrong man or having relationships with the wrong kind of person, that's not helping me to grow. But it is helping me to grow because of the things I had to overcome and become strong and realize, and it's not become strong, I realize I am strong. So, and that I am enough. That was the other thing, those two things of realizing that.
In that moment, or through having these relationships?
In that moment, because the Mapuche said, I have a long line of women in my ancestry that had deadbeat husbands. I don't know. I don't want to put down all men, because it's not all men. It's just you get attracted. Yeah. And I just heard Gabor Mate say yesterday that we tend to marry someone who is at the same level of trauma as we are. And when I was 18 and got married, I did marry somebody who was also with a lot of trauma, and we found each other, and we grew together to a point. I kept growing and he didn't. And I kept trying to heal for my kids, and he kept going the other way. And so, I really believed in him. I saw he had lots of potential, and he was growing for probably 10 years, and then it got too much for him, and he just started regressing and becoming more like a teenager. That's all I can describe it. Yeah, I'm basically a narcissist. Right. And when we went to counseling, and the woman called me and she said, we went to marriage counseling, and she said, I think you might be a psychopath or sociopath, so, be very careful. So that was my first warning. And that was in 1988, just before I had that moment of
the illness. Yes. In 8 years?
Yeah.
Okay. So at that point in 1988, when that woman, your first warning, you said, so like...
It wasn't the first warning, but it was, there was red flags all the time.
Right. Then how much longer were you with him after that?
Basically, that was in February 1988. We moved to the mainland in May of 1988. The marriage was over by July 1988. Okay. Yeah. So, but the marriage had been over for a couple of years already before that.
Okay. And so when you're saying this woman in Chile,
yes,
what's her name again?
Pamela.
Pamela was saying, in translation to her daughter, to you, talking about this pattern of having men in a long line of, and even you're saying your grandmother was divorced in the 30s?
Yes. And so she said that I can be very grateful to my grandmother for standing up for herself. My mother, unfortunately, also married somebody with trauma, and but she, by the time she was 60, she stood up for herself. It took her longer, and she divorced as well. But she, she really loved my dad, so she kind of tried to put up with it, but she did not do any work. So my two grandmothers had a lot of influence on me in that, how important it is to do the healing.
So is it your maternal grandmother or the paternal grandmother that we're talking about that got divorced in the 30s?
My mother's mother.
Okay.
Yeah.
And she lived here?
She lived in Victoria.
Oh.
She was friends with Emily Carter.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. And she taught Indigenous people in the 30s and 40s how to read at night school.
Wow.
So she had a connection.
Yeah. That's cool. Okay. So people that watch my channel may know that I was just out of a toxic relationship. So there's just a pattern that is emerging from the generational deadbeat partners or narcissistic men. So what can you explain in your opinion, like what that's about?
Okay. Well, I can only say it for me what it was like. I got married at the age of 18. I moved out of my parents' house when I was 17. And because I couldn't be in that energy anymore, it was very toxic. My mother was quite depressed, but never recognizing that she was not happy, and she was kind of, I always thought as a teenager, I thought she had just lived in denial. She just couldn't cope with that, the amount of emotional stuff that was happening.
You were saying your mother moved out, or you moved out because
I moved out. Yeah, and then just got married. So I didn't work through anything or do anything. So what the Mapuche elder told me was that the healing that I have been doing since a very young age, of striving to understand God in my life and personify love and kindness. That was the advice I got from my dad's mom, was just be kind. Just be kind. And she gave me the book Into with the Infinite. So she understood it, and she went to the the High Anglican Church. So, but that was that Mapuche elder told me that my purpose was to be healing the line of women in my ancestry, to help them heal. My mother's mother's mother, so my great-grandmother, all maternal, she also married very young, 15 or 16, and had 19 children. And I read some of her writing, and
19 children?
She had 19 children. Yes. And I had a box of my grandmother's, that was all her writing, because she was trying to write to get published. And she had a box of rejection slips. And I read some of her short stories, and it was just so, she grew up in Ottawa Valley in Ontario, and she was just so depressed and so beaten down. And this husband that was, I think he built houses, but he would go away and then come back once a year and get her pregnant and then go away again. And so she was just so lonely and so unhappy. She lived to be 98.
Wow.
She had 19 children, but only 9 lived to adulthood, because through that flu that happened in the turn of the century. So so my grandmother was the second oldest of 19 children. My mother had an uncle that she was older than, so when she was born, her grandmother was still having children.
Wow.
So, her uncle Winston is 3 years younger than her. So, anyways, that's upside. But just the writing that I read, there was just so heartfelt sadness, and so the Mapuche elder said that I was healing her and her mother, and so when I was working with the Anishinaabe elder, she said exactly the same thing. She said, "Oh, the work you're doing is healing your grandmothers and your great grandmother, and also your granddaughters and great granddaughters. So the work that I was doing was healing through the generations, both ways, which is why time doesn't matter." So, and then I was working with a Nutella elder at a women's camp, a healing camp, and she said exactly the same thing the other two said.
Wow.
So, and then the Sanemo elder that I was working with, he said, "You're a healer," and I went, "No, I'm not really. I'm an educator. I'm not." He said, "You're a healer," and so, but that's all he said. But he could sense that.
Yeah. So what's the work that you do to heal that within yourself and within others? When it ripples out.
Well, when the Mapuche elder said that the healing work that I'm doing is healing ancestors, I thought, oh, I better start working hard. Like, what do I have to do? Just tell me what to do. I'll just do it. Check, check, check. But it's like, just relax. And so basically, it's just healing myself. And that's what Gabor Mate said. Because I have a friend, she said, "I can't read Gabor Mate because I don't want to stir up all that trauma." And Gabor Mate said in one of his videos, "Don't worry about how you felt then. How do you feel right now?"
Yeah.
And that's what I'm doing now, is healing now. And that's healing my childhood, helping my mother and grandmother's childhood. I don't need to worry about going back and understanding their childhood.
Right.
I don't need to worry about what abuse happened to me when I was a child. It comes out in the expressions of how I'm feeling now.
So, but when that person was saying they don't want to look at it, like, don't you think there's a line between avoiding feeling? Mm-hmm. So,
but she didn't want to deal with how she felt now either.
Right.
So it's not that she's afraid to look back at her childhood and have to deal with it. She doesn't want to deal with her feelings right now still.
Which is unhealthy.
Yes.
So the work is then, like, what exactly? Like, can we nail it down?
Right.
So, like,
what do I have to do?
Yeah, no, can we nail it down for everyone listening as well? Like, what does that look like? Is that like just simply how do you feel now? So asking yourself that, but if there's something yucky that comes up, are you just feeling it and observing it with love to transmute it? Or
yes, that's definitely one thing to do. But I just start with gratitude. I always just start with gratitude. And you know the wellness wheel. If you think of the 4 elements of your everyday life, you have the mental, the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual.
Okay.
And in the middle of that, if you've divided it into 4 quadrants, I want a blackboard. But there's the emotional, so being aware. Take 10 minutes every day to either morning or evening, or how am I feeling right now? The mental, what can I learn? Oh, that book looks interesting. I'll read a chapter from that. You don't have to read the whole book. Just whatever is moved to you, curiosity. That's the mental. And then the spiritual, I go for a walk on the beach every morning or in the forest. I was forest bathing way before the word forest bathing happened. I knew it was healing to walk in a forest. Just 20 minutes. And we were fortunate to live on the Saanich Peninsula. We had 2 acres of forest. And I just have to walk through there. And that would heal me and rejuvenate me. So
sorry, when you refer to 2 acres, when was that? Like,
well, when from 1979 to 88, so we lived in,
with your 5 kids.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the husband.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the 4 quadrants.
Yes, and that's what I teach my students. We draw a circle and put it into 4 quadrants, and not square this way, but that way.
Okay.
And the emotional comes from the East. I know I'm kind of combining Christian and Indigenous, and so the emotional part we need to take care of. The physical part, so moving. and sleeping. And then the mental is following your curiosity. What are you interested in today? And it might be, oh, look, there's a butterfly. And then you just, oh, think about butterflies, and oh, rainbows, thinking about what are rainbows. Rainbows is when a white light comes and breaks into colors. And that's our personality. We are white light, but it comes out in through the chakras of different colors, and sometimes our color work where our aura is more dominant with blue right now rather than so. And I wear blue when I'm speaking because that's the throat chakra. So that's whole other that's whole other teaching.
Cool.
But that, those 4 quadrants of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, and then the center of that is social and our relationships with people. If we take care of those 4 things of ourself every day, we will have healthy relationships with people. So I really recommend even just 10 minutes every day for each one of those, just being aware of it, but always starting with gratitude and then acknowledging the land we're on right now. That kind of grounds you, and then just being mindful of that. Like, you go to the gym almost every day, that's your physical. You're always reading spiritual things, so that's your mental, but it's also spiritual. But for me, spiritual is really more about connecting with nature, because when I teach my students, I make them go out without a cell phone and sit in the forest for an hour, and then they have to come back and reflect and write. And it's just amazing what comes out of that when they don't have their cell phone. I take their cell phones away sometimes. And they spend an hour sitting in the forest or by the ocean. And then sometimes they write right then, but then they reflect and they remember how they loved to play on the beach when they were a kid or that. So connecting with nature, you're connecting with yourself. So
I want to go back to one thing you said earlier about we're white light and the chakras and the rainbow analogy. It reminded me of like oneness and how like we're all one, and so like we're all white light, we're all one, and then the rainbow splitting off into different colors is like the illusion of separateness of all our personalities being different, and we appear to be in separate bodies but we're really all spiritual beings having a human experience.
Yes, and that's what I learned from Lee Maricle's book, Celia's Song, is that there's a gossamer threads traveling through the universe, like mycelium, connecting people. And so even if you only meet a person once, you're now connected. And a perfect example of that is I was at a conference in Lakehead, Ontario, which is a weird little place in northwest Ontario in a remote area. Took 3 hours to just drive there from Thunder Bay or something. And we were at a dinner and there was a guy kept looking over at me, and then and I was just going through a divorce, so I was kind of free, and but I wasn't interested in a relationship at all. But I thought, oh, he's kind of flirting with me. And then the next night we sat at the table together, and then because all day he kept looking over at me, and one time he went, hi, and so he's quite good looking. And so then the next night he sat at the table with me. There was 10 of us, and we were having a great time. And then he said, oh, I went to a family reunion in Ottawa. And I said, oh, last summer, and I was supposed to go to a family reunion in Ottawa, but I couldn't afford to go. Anyways, we started checking, and it was the same family reunion. 2,000 people came from all over the world.
Wow.
And because they all had this one ancestor that came to Canada in 1763, and George Tinkus, and settled in the Ottawa Valley, and then our uncles and aunts did all this research before computers and invited all the descendants of him to this reunion. So then I thought, well, then that means we're related. And so we started working it out, because he kept saying, no, we've met. Because he said, I recognized you right away, and I know we must have met at a different conference. So first we went through all that, trying to figure out where we met. No. And his name was James Dory from Nova Scotia. Anyways, his great-grandmother and my great-grandmother, the one that had 19 children, were sisters.
Wow.
But he recognized me, and I recognized him too. I thought...
just a knowing.
Yeah. So that's the gossamer thread that connects us all. Our great-grandmothers were sisters. And my great-grandmother moved somewhere, and then his great-grandmother moved to Nova Scotia and married, and so. But when, in those days, women had to take the men's name, women lose an identity of themselves.
Right.
And then they get lost in the, so that, there's always a connection. So.
Yeah.
And that, like you said, we're all one.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone is. And I when I'm in the forest, I feel I'm one with the trees. And,
there's a spiritual teacher, I guess you could say, on YouTube. His name's Aaron Abke, and he talks about, have you heard of the Law of One?
Yes.
Yeah, that book.
Yes.
The Raw Contact and the Law of One.
I haven't read it, but I've heard of it.
Okay.
Yes.
I kind of dabbled a little bit, but I won't say it goes over my head, but like when I first started listening to it, it kind of went over my head. But then, anyway, it's very interesting. But he talks about how, like, well, in the Raw Contact, and Aaron Abke talks about this, teaches on that book, how consciousness evolves from different levels, and there's different levels of consciousness, and humans are like in the middle somewhere, but like he talks about how like all of us as humans have experienced being a rock and experienced being a tree, and there's consciousness in everything. And so I try to be aware of that when I'm in nature, especially like you can communicate with the nature and the trees, and just like through feeling and through knowing, and it's like just the idea that there's consciousness in everything. It's just really fascinating.
Yeah, and a lot of indigenous cultures teach that the rocks and mountains are our grandfathers. So we came through that. And I'm researching now about mushrooms and psilocybin mushrooms, and there's a connection with that. When they talk about the missing link in the evolution of man, they figure that humans way back ate the mushrooms and then became aware of that oneness, that we're all part of it, and we all came through the rocks, the consciousness of rocks. And the Coast Salish elders that I work with, they believe that their ancestors came from the sky, and so stardust came to Earth, and that's how humans evolved. So it's amazing to me. You could never end in learning. And that my advice always is stay curious. If you're interested in something and say, what do you mean came from the sky? Then read a Coast Salish legend about the sky man that comes, or the sky woman in Anishinaabe. The woman comes, and she comes to the turtle's back, and that's why they call Canada Turtle Island. So, but she came from the sky and mixed, spit in the mud, and then made a man. It's a lovely story. She was lonely, and so she made a man. But it's because he comes from the earth, but she came from the sky.
Cool. Okay, let's see where we're on track here.
Probably way off track.
Yeah. Okay. So with big T or little t trauma, do you believe that two things, like, do you believe that we choose these things before we come here to evolve and learn? Like, do you think as a spirit before we are born, do you think that we like have an agreement to go through certain things so that we can evolve?
Well, first of all, I believe that anything is possible. And so I'm open. And I kind of lean towards believing that my soul chose my parents, and my soul knew it was going to come through some tough stuff. But I mean, it's taken me my whole life to understand that life is about struggle and suffering, and doesn't really matter what happens to us. It's really how we respond that creates who we are. And I learned that young. I know when I was in a new city, didn't know anybody, and went to the welfare office because my husband left and took the money, but I did have a house with a mortgage. And I couldn't just suddenly just get a job to pay the mortgage. Luckily, the woman at the bank gave me a month off of paying the mortgage. But I went to the welfare office, and the woman said no twice. I had to make 2 visits. She said, borrow money from your family or something. I came back the 3rd time, and I said, oh, my parents are retired on fixed income, and I don't know anybody here. And so she said, oh, well, you're going to have to go back to school. And I said, yeah, that's the point. That's what I want to do. And she wanted me to take this 3-month thing to work in a nursing home. But I had a really bad back then. I couldn't do physical work. But she said, yeah, but you have no skills. And I went home thinking, and she did let me be on social assistance. But I went home and I thought, I do have skills. And I got a piece of paper and I wrote down, I can milk a cow in 27 minutes. I can create a budget and feed a family of 6 with, $100, and I can make bread, and so I just listed everything. So instead of getting despairing and giving up, I got angry and fighting, and I went back to her and I said, no, I want support. And so I did testing and all that stuff. It turned out I couldn't do any of the things that she wanted me to do. So, which was a real low point, because I had to go to the food bank and borrow money for gas for my car. And anyways, that was when I thought I did get one little part-time job delivering phone books, which was very physical, but I just thought, okay, I'm just going to get a student loan and go to university. And so I went to university, had 3 part-time jobs. I was a part-time student, so that was how I responded, was I have to take charge of my own life and not give up or go to the dark space, just to stay like lifting my foot and putting it on the next rock that's going to be there. And it happened every time. One time when I had no money and I didn't know what I was going to do, my English teacher said, hey, do you want a part-time job? So it's $10 an hour at that time was a lot of money. And I could work at home, just dictaphone, and that was about the Japanese redress, and I typed all of it. So by listening to their conversation, then I had to type it all out. But that gave us money, and so
just having the trust,
yes,
that you're supported.
Yeah.
So just to circle back to the question, was like, so you think we go through these things to like evolve and learn and choose how to respond differently?
Yes, yeah. And because there's something in me that needs the challenge to overcome, that makes me even stronger and stronger and stronger. Because I used to work with Indigenous young women, single moms, trying to come back to school, and then I would say, "You're such a strong person," and sometimes I'd say, "I'm just tired of being strong, just tired of being strong." I was like, "How long do I have to keep being strong?" And I said, "Your whole life, you're gonna always have to be. Just trust that you're gonna get through this too." So yeah, that's. And I don't know where I got that from. Maybe a woman said that to me when I was young. Don't worry, you're going to get through it. So, yeah.
I like the lesson that your grandmother said about just being kind.
Yes.
I've been watching a lot of near-death experiences lately, and a lot of them have a common themes of what they experience. Like they have these spiritual experiences where they, like, some of them have visions of Jesus, or some of them meet God, or some of them meet their deceased loved ones, and they're even their pets that have gone, and they have all these really interesting experiences. Like when they were dead for a period of time, their consciousness was out of their body and having a whole experience. And the reason I'm bringing that up is, why am I bringing that up? The life review. So a lot of them have this experience, a lot of like not all of them, but a large portion of them have this similar experience where they have a life review, where they are shown through a screen moments of their lives, and they feel how they made other people feel, whether that was good or bad. So if their effects on others were negative, they will feel how that other person felt. And one in particular, I'm interviewing her tomorrow, I believe it's her, and she had an experience where, like, she witnessed something positive she did for somebody else, and then she got to see the ripple effect in 2 other people's lives that it had, in like a completely different timeline that she never would have seen, but she was shown, like, just a simple act of kindness that she didn't think much of. She just helped a single mom with groceries. Like, she didn't have an extra bit of money, and she helped with that. Like, she was standing behind her in line, and she was figuring out what to put back, and she's like, "Here, I'll just pay the rest." And she just, like, didn't think much of it, and, like, it just rippled out, because then that person helped somebody else in a similar situation later. So it's just really interesting to think about, like, how something as simple as just embodying loving kindness affects others that we will never know.
Yes, that's right. Yes. And I really tried to teach my kids that, to just be kind and think about others, and not before yourself, but equally with yourself, and then just be open to, somebody needs help with the door, or just simple things. And simple little acts of kindness. And I liked what you said about how when you do that, you feel better. So just helping another person. It's like one of the I think it's Native American sayings is, if you help another person cross the river, you also cross. So you're helping someone else. And I used to think that, well, I can't really help anybody until I sort myself out. Like, I really thought that I really couldn't help other people until I was,
Perfect.
Yes, perfect. But you don't have to know everything in these books before you can understand a lot and help other people.
Yeah.
So
You can.
Like, that's one question I have for you, is what is moving you to want to share what you're learning with other people?
Yeah. It's my passion, like, talking about things that are to do with spirituality, and I feel like a lot of people go through life not knowing these things, and I think it's doing a service to others, but also to myself. So, like, sharing interesting conversations with people who have different perspectives from all over the world. It just, because I consume a lot of content like that, but I just know I don't have a ton of people in my personal life that resonate with the same thing. So it's partly for myself to be able to talk about what I want to talk about, and be in that energy, and talk to people that get it, and also to be sharing that with other people, so that other people can open their minds and start their own journey. And because I know, like, I don't know, like a huge part of my spiritual journey has been learning from interviews like these. So yeah, just sharing it with other people so that other people can expand and grow, while also I'm very lucky to be able to have conversations like these, like heart-centered conversations with really cool people. To go back to the point before, just about the service to yourself and others, it's like a Course in Miracles principle where, like, and Neville Goddard, like, everyone is you pushed out, so there are no others. Like, other people are a reflection of yourself. So just like when the elders that you were talking to all said the same thing about healing, and when you heal yourself, you're healing generational trauma. It's the same thing. It's like when you carry yourself in a vibration of love and just an intention of love and kindness, that energy, like, we're all just vibrating energy, so that energy permeates out in, like, ways that we may never see. So the people around us and the people that we come in contact with, it will lift them up as well. And yeah, the helping yourself, like taking care of yourself, ripples out. Like, logically it doesn't really, sometimes it doesn't click, but spiritually it makes sense because we're all connected. So whatever you do to yourself, you're doing to others. Whatever you do to others, you do to yourself. So, like, even judging, and that's why forgiveness is a huge principle in A Course in Miracles, because whenever you're judging somebody, and it's not to be perfect, because, like, we all have an ego that's there, so it will, sometimes the thoughts just come, but just catching it and forgiving and not hooking onto it and identifying with it. But yeah, so just like being aware of judgment, and because when you're judging somebody else, it's actually just turning it around and seeing, like, what am I actually not okay with within myself? Because what's that saying? If you spot it, you got it.
Yeah, one finger pointing is three fingers pointing back.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, if you recognize a good quality in a person, that's in you too.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I always look for mentors, and they could be a mentor in that one conversation, or they can be a mentor for a year. Or and I like what you said about you're helping not just generations, but you're also helping just people around you. When I was at UBC, the Dalai Lama came and spoke, and I happened to be at the back of the stage as he's walked in through this room. I happened to be there. I don't know why. And holding the door, and he walked past. I felt complete love.
Wow.
Complete love. And I understood in that moment what instantaneous forgiveness is. And so we are just beams of light, and the more we can keep that light going, and light and love, it is affecting people. Just his presence, I was healed. And that thing of touching the hem of Jesus' garment, that woman was healed. That was a moment like that. And he didn't look right at me, but he looked, like, smiled and kind of thanked for the door. But that was so that energy, that's what I strive for. Is that I would be a positive influence. I don't ever think that I'm ever going to be the Dalai Lama, but I want to be that loving kindness that when I'm with someone, they feel a little bit better.
Well, I do feel that way in your presence, Grass.
I feel the same with you. But I did have another quick question, if you don't mind. How you started with, like, the law of assumption with Neville Goddard, and now you've branched out to so much. How do you keep it? Because I get overwhelmed with the amount of research and reading I do, and I usually read 4 or 5 books at one time.
Same.
And I all see the connecting thing, and that's so I guess that's my answer. My own question is that you just are always looking for that healing. That so how do you manage? Where direction are you going? Like, it's just
Have you ever heard of human design?
No.
It's kind of like astrology. I don't know a ton about it, but basically there's these different human design, which is, I think it's also based on your chart, if I'm not mistaken, but there's different categories in which the way you think and the way you work, and I fall into, it's called manifesting generator, which just means like you're always on the go and there's always the next thing and there's always 10 projects going on at once, and it just really resonates because I'm always like, this thing, that thing.
I'm like that.
Yeah, you're probably the same. I don't know. We'll have to look it up after. But
Yeah.
there's two different ones. There's generator and then manifesting generator.
I see. Okay.
There's more than two.
Yes.
There's other one. There's projector. I forget. But yeah. So anyway, just side note. But that it feels like very scatterbrained. But I just kind of have to not judge myself for that, because I like what you're saying. You're like, oh, you could just grab a book and then read the chapter of it, and that's kind of what I do. Like but I kind of had to get over the beating myself up for not finishing things, and to a certain extent I do want to finish books, because like I don't want to just not read something to the whole thing.
Think of that one chapter as the next stepping stone.
Yes.
To understanding something else.
Yes.
Your understanding is broadening and also deepening.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I also want to have the self-discipline to finish something at the same time. It's the same thing with courses. Like I'll have a bunch of courses like EFT and all these spirituality things that I'm interested in, because I have a broad interest in all these things, and then I just don't finish them. So I'm gonna go back and finish things. But like from Neville Goddard and the Law of Assumption, I don't know if it's an evolution of consciousness or what, but I still love Neville Goddard's work and things like that. But I do like the variety and seeing the common thread between them, and the other reason for the podcast is like not having to pick just one thing, because I can have people on that have had near-death experiences and have like met God,
but it's all related and
it's
we're all one.
Yes, exactly. But
yeah.
the common theme is spirituality and love and oneness.
Yeah.
So
well, and I started with the law of attraction, because there's the 12 laws.
Yeah.
And so that there's so much, and I think people just need to come where they are. They start where they are, and then whatever's attracting them, and it's quite often related to what they're working through in their life.
Yeah.
And it's just helping them get through. I'm reading a book called Angels in My Hair by Lorna Byrne. She talks with angels, and she said we all have a guardian angel, and they're trying to whisper all the time, like, have you read this book yet? So I really am trying to be in tune with that. I never knew whether I believed in guardian angels or we all have one. I do now. So I'm just still learning about that.
Yeah.
But,
there's so much to learn.
yeah, and so that's why, just follow what you're interested in now. Don't worry about finishing every book.
Yeah.
Because I got into tapping for a while because that was helping, and but now I don't do it anymore, and so whatever works, it doesn't really matter. I think people need to find their own way. Yeah, because some people, they start out just trying to manifest more money, but then it leads to so many other things. Yeah, so there's some prosperity means so much more than that.
Not just money. Abundance is more than just money. Yeah. For the audience, I just want to mention, because you said you started with the law of attraction, and so did I, and you're the reason for that, because you were the one that I'm pretty sure you told me about What the Bleep Do We Know. I think that was the first thing. Yeah. And then The Secret, both of those. So that's what kind of opened the door to that for me. Yeah. So just side note, but I never fully understood it. That's the thing. Like I never I liked the idea of it and I believed in it, but I didn't understand how to make it work for me until I found the law of assumption. It really resonated with me with it seemed to focus more on embodiment, or the way he described it, like feeling is the secret, becoming the version of you who already has that which you desire, and that made sense to me. So that's kind of what was the catalyst for.
And just when you're saying that, you're speaking from an authority, because you really have experienced it and know it now. Yeah. So It's like Carl Jung. They said, "Do you believe in God or not? Do you believe in God?" And he said, "I know God."
Yeah.
And so when you say, "Oh," you say it so fast, like the law of attraction. You're more than like the feeling is the thing. You're saying it so fast because it's part of who you are now.
Yeah.
And someone new to that thinking, "Oh, that sounds good, but I don't get it. How do I do it?"
Right.
So it's like that thing about just let it go. Just let something that you did a month ago and you're still angst about it. Just let it go. And then people go, "Yeah, but how do you do that?" Like, just let it go.
That's like Michael Singer. Have you heard him talk about this?
Yes.
He's like, you're holding on, like, you picture you have a pen in your hand, and you're like, yeah, just let go.
Yes.
Just let go. Just open your hand and let go. And it's like,
Yeah.
we want to make it so complicated, and it's like, but it's hurts.
But I had to do it with my head first, with the feelings, and I would put it in a balloon, and I would just let go of the balloon and let it go.
Yeah.
And then I got to and I did it in my head, and then I got to the feeling, just actually feel it for a minute, and then just let it go.
Yeah.
And it just takes practice, like anything else.
And that's the thing with, it's emotional intelligence or emotional, what's the word for it? It's like alchemy. It's so when it's coming up, it's like the grand consensus of most people is to shove down and not feel and to avoid and to put it in a box, and I don't have time for that, and that doesn't benefit me, so put that away. But what's healthy is it's trying to tell you something, is to let it fully feel it and like move through it and let it move through you and let it go.
Yes, and I used to, with my feelings, I felt like there was this big, I had a dam, a wall that was holding it all there. And I had a counselor that said, just let yourself feel a little bit. Like, just have a little hole in the wall and let some out. And I went, no, the whole dam will crash and it'll all... It's like, I can't because I have to go to work tomorrow and I've got to feed my kids. And I can't let just a little bit out because it'll overwhelm me and destroy me.
Yeah.
And that's just my head thinking, you're not going to be destroyed. And when I understood about instantaneous forgiveness, it's like, I can let a little bit out. And I don't have to say, I'm so angry that happened to me something when I was 8. No, I can just say, Brian, you never put the toothpaste cap back on the tape. And I'm getting frustrated and angry about that. And just express a little bit of anger about it and just be honest. And then he goes, oh, sorry. When I did that, he's never forgotten to put the toothpaste. And I didn't do it with anger. I just expressed my frustration. So I didn't have to have a big wall of anger coming at him. That's from other things. That's just awareness. So just allow a little bit of anger or frustration out and letting yourself feel it and then let it go. Yeah. So, but again, takes practice. I'm still learning. Yeah.
Do you have time for one more topic?
Yep.
Okay. I just wanted to maybe dive into manifestation and what your views are on that, and because I know you have a cool story with the home that you live in, with how you're visualizing.
Yes. I wanted to live in a little cottage in the forest, and I just had this image, and we were living in a tiny 100-year-old house with a basement and a 1-bedroom, and I had a baby. And I found a picture in a magazine, and it was the cottage with a wraparound porch with flowers. And so I cut it off and put it on my vision board.
When was this?
That was in 1971.
You had a vision board in 1971?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the 60s and 70s, we did all of that kind of stuff. Creative visualization before there was words for it. So I had this little vision board. And then we, and that was after I got married. So that was where I wanted to raise my kids. And so then, I had kids, and then we bought our first house. I got married at 18, had a baby at 19, and bought a house at 20. And we bought our first house by the airport in Sydney, and then we sold it and we bought another, bought a half a condo, half a duplex, which was a horrible place to live. And then the third house we bought was this tar paper shack on 2 acres in the forest. And we spent, and meanwhile, my vision board had been packed away all that time, never unpacked it out of the box because it was just a small vision board. And then we bought this tar paper shack, and then we added onto it. We put cedar paneling on the side and the cedar roof, and we built a deck, and we had flower pots and everything. And then we now had room, and so I unpacked it, and I put the vision board up on the wall, and I thought, oh, wait a minute. And I walked outside, and 20 feet from the house, I looked back at the house, and that was exactly that image.
Wow.
Exactly. That was the cedar house, and the deck and the flower, just all flowers around it. It was exactly that picture.
Wow.
So, and if I had a camera at the time, I would have taken a picture. Or, we didn't have a camera then. But yeah, so I created it, I visualized it, and I created it without knowing that I was visualizing that. Because I'd forgotten about that picture until I brought it out. It would have been, so it would have been about 10 years later.
Wow.
So it took 10 years to create that.
Yeah.
But I created that exact image.
So you put it on the vision board, you visualized it at some point.
Yeah.
And then you let it go.
Exactly.
So surrender.
Yes.
Yeah. So what about more lately? Like, what are your beliefs about it, or what's your favorite way to create something? Like, if you're trying to create something new, is it visualization still?
Always being open. Just being open to whatever might happen next.
Mm.
I mean, the house that we have now by the beach, I visualized same thing, big pink flowers. I thought it was hollyhocks, but there's another name for it. And that it was going to be close to a forest and close to a beach, and it just manifested. And I just thought, well, that would be nice, but I didn't take any steps to do it. It just, when we were looking for a house to rent, and when we saw that, at first I thought, no, I don't want that house. It doesn't have a bathtub. And when we looked at it, the flowers weren't there or anything. They hadn't grown yet. And then the landlord said, well, I'll put a bathtub in for you.
Oh.
And so, okay. And so we rented that house, and then we were there a month, and all these pink flowers just came. I think you saw the flowers. Yeah. So I thought, that's what there was my guardian angel telling me, look for the house with the pink flowers, and that's the one that you're meant to be in. So
beautiful.
Yeah.
So it's more like, it's not, you don't have like a rigid process. It's more like being open to co-creation.
Yeah, because I used to try to say, this is what I want, this is what I want, this is what I want. And then it doesn't happen.
Yeah. And
it's more of trusting.
Yeah.
And this is what I want to create for myself. This is the life I want. And yeah, I have a whole other story about husbands and my current husband. She doesn't like me calling him current husband, but he's my husband, but my husband. But yeah, that is what I wanted. Before I met Brian, I'd asked the universe for a friend. I wanted a best friend that I could trust and just be myself completely with. And at the time, I didn't care whether it was a man or a woman. I just wanted a friend that would be there for me. And then I met him in grad school, and then we just became really good friends for 6 years, and before we even ever went on a date. And so then at some point I realized, oh, this is what the universe is giving me what I asked for. So
sneaks up on you.
Yes, yeah. But if I had said, I want this, I want this friend, I want them to be this way and specific, yeah, I just let the specifics go.
Yeah.
But the specifics was how I wanted to feel when I'm with them. specifically that, not what they look like or anything.
I've said this many times on the podcast before, but one of my favorite quotes is from Florence Scovel Shinn, and it's applicable here. Your ships sail in on I don't care sea. So like how you're saying that grasping, it needs to be this way. It's like you're being so fixated on like the exact way it needs to look. And just like letting go of that and being okay with co-creation and being okay for it to look slightly different, or just being a little bit more open and less grasping and desperate, caring less about it coming in exactly a certain package.
Another example of that is my quest for understanding, like you said, about understanding different perspectives in the world. When I really started learning about the Coast Salish and the Haida elder, I've met a woman in Haida as well. I would never have guessed that I would get a trip to Chile and meet a Mapuche woman that I still have a friendship with, and I'm going to actually see her in a week when I go to Ontario. She's going to be there.
Oh, wow.
So I would never have been able to think that.
Yes.
It would be way beyond. If somebody said, oh, you're going to meet a Mapuche elder and she's going to become a good friend of yours, if she doesn't speak English and you don't speak Mapuche or Spanish, but you're going to become really good friends, I would have said, no, there's no way. Plus, I didn't like traveling, so I would have said, no, I'd never traveled to Chile. But I did twice.
Wow.
And I've met her in Ontario a few times. And she couldn't come. We had a conference on Vancouver Island, but she didn't come that year. But she was going to stay with me. But she sent a young student, and she stayed with us.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's the idea of this or something better. I think I've seen a lot of people online struggle with this concept because the ego wants to control and see it out in a certain way, or like in my way, the highway, like I'm going to create what I want or whatever. But yeah, I think having the openness and there's one line, and I think Jesus says it, be like a little child, like you know nothing, like just be open to creativity and being wowed and awed, and just surrendering to letting God or the universe bring you more than you could ever ask for, because it knows more than you.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Our human brains can't even fathom.
Yes. And our little egos think that we have to have control. And a lot of my life was led by anxiety that was actually so limiting. Yeah. So another book I read was Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. That changed my life. Yeah, that changed. Like, okay, you can be afraid, but still do it. Yeah. Yeah. Why would you let it stop you? Yeah. That was my whole big thing about public speaking, and I had to go up and speak with no preparation or anything. It's like, but I just did it. Yeah. That's kind of like staying consistent with YouTube or podcasting. There's a lot of fear that comes up, and it takes a lot to push through that. Yes, it does. Yes. Yeah. So feeling the fear and doing it anyway. We're doing it right now. Yes, exactly. I do it every day. Yeah. Okay. Well, we've been talking for a long time. So, yes. I can't believe how much time has gone by. But there's no such thing as time. True. Well, I love you, Graham. I love you too. Thanks for having this conversation with me, and and I'm so happy we did it on Mother's Day. Yes. 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 It's very symbolic. Yeah. Of course, it won't be shown on Mother's Day, but the time of filming this, it's Mother's Day. Yes. Right. It's Mother's Day every day. Yes. Yeah. So, is there anything that I haven't asked you, or is there any message that you want to leave, or anything that you've learned along your spiritual journey that you'd want to share as a last? My only thing is to always stay curious, and I'm a lifelong learner, so I'm always learning. Yeah. That's the thing, is just be open to always learning. Love that. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for joining me today. Okay, thank you for inviting me.
And thanks for listening, everybody, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.